Now we turn our attention to the African Union, yes, the AU, an institution that has been created to represent the hopes of over 1.4 billion Africans, yet one that often finds itself under fire for dysfunction, for inaction, and for political missteps. And now, under the leadership of Kenyan President William Ruto, a new wave of reform is being proposed, one that could redefine the AU's future or expose the deep fractures within. Now, just this year, the AU was sharply criticized after congratulating Tanzania's president on an election that was widely denounced as flawed. And it was actually a painful reminder of a reality many Africans whisper but rarely say out loud, that the AU reflects the dysfunction, the contradictions, and the political inconsistencies of its member states. But now, leaders are gathering again, this time in Nairobi, to propose a sweeping transformation. The reforms focus on strong institutions, reliable financing, and functional African courts of justice, and actually a clearer and faster decision-making structure. But will this be the AU's rebirth, or will this just be another round of speeches? Now, let's begin with the details, right? So we take you now to a full breakdown of the reform discussions that were led by President Ruto and the significance of the upcoming AU summit scheduled for November 2025 in Angola. Now, the Kenyan President William Ruto chaired a high-level meeting in Nairobi with senior African Union officials and the high-level panel on governance, peace, and security. And the goal was quite clear: to consolidate recommendations for AU institutional reforms ahead of the special summit next year. The key proposals include strengthening the AU's peace and security mechanisms, creating predictable financing systems, streamlining decision-making between AU Assembly and Executive Council, and revitalizing Pan-Africanism to elevate Africa's voice on global platforms. Now, Ruto argued that the implementation is quite essential for advancing Agenda 2063, which is the continent's long-term development plan. Let's watch this.
Because unless this organization is reformed, its own survival is at stake, because two fundamental things stand out. The decision-making, the whole architecture about the organization being representative, being democratic, being alive to the challenges that exist today and the realities of the moment. And that is why Africa has pushed for the reform.
Now, let me speak frankly, as I always do, and as a Black South African who has watched this AU stumble for years. I cannot believe we're still having this conversation about the African Union, an organization that was meant to unite us, to protect us, and propel us forward, but instead often feels like a mirror reflecting the dysfunction of the very states it represents. And let's be honest, the AU is only as strong as the governments inside it. And many of those governments, ours included, are dealing with corruption, with weak institutions, with slow responses to cries, and internal political chaos. So when the AU congratulates questionable elections or fails to intervene in devastating conflicts or issues statements with no action, Africans notice. We feel it. We live with the consequences, and sometimes it hurts because the AU was supposed to be our vehicle of Pan-Africanism, the Africa united our forefathers imagined. But that dream cannot survive on speeches alone. So when I saw President Ruto pushing for reforms, I felt two things at once. One, hope, right? Because someone is finally bold enough to call out the AU's inefficiencies. And two, caution, because Africa has heard big promises before. The AU does not need new slogans. It needs a spine. It needs funding that actually arrives on time. It needs institutions that function even when leaders disagree. It needs to prioritize African lives over African politics, because we cannot keep pretending that our continent is facing coups, is facing regional conflicts, is facing economic instability, ecological disasters, youth unemployment, and a widespread of governance crisis. And yet the AU often responds with silence. And as an African myself, I've seen what happens when regional bodies fail to act decisively. When the AU hesitates, conflicts spread. When leaders protect each other instead of protecting citizens, instability grows. And when accountability disappears, so does progress. The AU needs reforms, and not cosmetic ones, but the kind that shake the room. Ruto talks about streamlining decision making. Good, right? But what good is a fast decision if it still avoids confronting dictators? He calls for predictable funding. Excellent, right? But will member states drowning in their own crisis actually pay on time? And he calls for a stronger African Court of Justice. Beautiful idea. But will powerful leaders allow themselves to be held accountable by that very court? These are the questions that define the AU's future. Because without courageous implementation, all we have are conferences and photo ops. So here's my closing thought, right? Africa deserves an African Union that works, and not one that reacts slowly, and not one that avoids difficult conversations, and not one that congratulates questionable elections or protects leaders over citizens. A strong AU isn't a luxury, it's survival, because when the AU fails, Africans suffer. And when the AU is silent, conflicts escalate. And when the AU lose credibility, the dream of united, empowered Africa drifts further away. If President Ruto's reforms can bring honesty and accountability and urgency back in the AU, then I believe we're witnessing history. And if not, well, then we are watching another cycle of good intentions swallowed by political comfort. Africa's watching, Africa's waiting, and Africa deserves better. Now, I'm Naledi Mfoloe reporting for ANC. Please, let's continue the conversation in the comment section. I want to hear what your thoughts are on this. And while you're at it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. That's it from me. Till we meet again, it is bye-bye for now.